good morning. Thank you so much for coming in, Jimmy Whatley and Increase Boss. So a lot of times the flow of money kind of gets in the way of business, right?
The flow of money is business, my friend.
That is, right. I mean, when I would used to do real estate, basically one of our rules is how you got the money for that project would be how you're going to turn in selling that project. So if you got a 30-year loan, you might own or finance that property or rent out that property because you have a 30-year loan to use that money. Or if you were flipping the property and you had cash on it, then you'd want to get that money back, and so you'd probably try to sell it for cash and get that money back. And so there's some real rules to investing and tying up your money and stuff like that and having that plan. But for business, I think we forget that there's a plan behind the money. There's a plan of how the money's going to come in, how long you're going to have to wait for it to come in, what you're going to be a return on your money. Let's talk about that today.
I'm delighted to talk about cash flow. That's what you're talking about.
Cash flow.
And, before you can worry about cash flow, you got to have some cash to flow, which means you got to run a business pretty well. Right. You got to have a plan. You got to sell some products. You got to collect some money. You got to have expenses that are under control. One of the worst things you can do in any business, it'll get you out, is running out of cash. So you can't grow any faster than you can grow cash. Some of these companies today go 10 years and they still cash negative, or they hadn't made a profit yet. The Amazons and folks like that amaze me because they say they found people with deep pockets that are willing to put billions of dollars in there because on the come 10 years it's going to be a great winner. And that folks made a lot of money doing that. I'm just not in that mindset. That doesn't light my fire. Let me put it that way. What I like to do is get a business, have a business plan, sell something, have expenses where you can predict what the sales are going to be, what the gross margin is going to be, and then look at how you manage that cash and reinvest it in the growth of the company. If you're growing at 20, 30% a year, it'll eat your cash up so quick it'll make your head spin. And it also goes back to what's the gross margin on this? Let me give you an example. Our friends in the grocery business, the big boys, you know what kind of margins they have on that stuff?
Very small.
Very small. I was sitting with a VP of one of the folks years ago, and he said, we have about 0.75% gross margin.
Wow.
That's not much gross margin.
No.
But let me tell you, they generate cash. You know why? Because when you go in there and try to sell them something, they say, here's a shelf over here, and we'll let you put your stuff on that shelf, but you got to pay us a slotting fee. In other words, you got to rent the spot to put your stuff in because they just bring in customers. And then the next thing they do, they'll say, you bring it and we'll put it on the shelf and we're going to pay you basically when we get ready to. Then they're going to pay you 60, 90 days, whatever they can get away with. And then they go put it on the shelf, and as you and I come through as consumers, we buy it, and guess what? We pay cash immediately. They don't have any, we'll get it later. You don't walk out of a grocery store with groceries and say, today I'll pay you later. Used to be, you had it on the tab and you'd clear up every month. But right now, you give them that card or you give them that cash or you don't get the groceries. So what they've done is they have drug payables. That is, they'll buy something in truckload quantities, pay it 60, 90 days, and they'll sell that immediately, get cash for it. So they generate cash like you wouldn't believe. Now, they got to pay salaries and they got to have leases on buildings and things like that. But most of them, they don't buy buildings. They lease a building. They don't put that capital to work on things other than what they're good at. And they're good at getting folks in the stores, getting it clean, getting it laid out, and deciding and marketing and having the big stuffers in the paper. Well, mama looks at it and says, toilet paper, 10 cents a roll. I'm going to get some of that. And while I'm there, I'm going to get some shampoo, and they make good margin on it.
Well, and that's funny because like a lot of businesses, when you're starting out, you almost think you have to buy the product yourself. You don't think about all of the millions of dollars that are sitting in Walmart right now that Walmart doesn't own. It's not, Walmart did not give cash and then in hopes that they could sell that product. But how many times do we run businesses that way? We give cash for products and then hope that we'll be able to sell that product down the line. I thought there was a neat thing that you said, though, on you used to be able to, on the tab,
That's right.
put it down every month and come back, which is basically credit. And then what happened is credit cards came out, so the tab went away because businesses are like, man, this person moved this. And so then companies stopped doing it on the tab, and now they let credit cards do it. And one of the main things, I think a lot of companies, if you don't have a credit card collecting system like Square, or something like that, where you can get money that people are borrowing on the arm. So many times I see like an AC company. AC company will come in and they're going to charge $5,000 to $12,000 for something, and they're talking to a homeowner, and the homeowner might not have $5,000 to $12,000, $10,000, whatever it is. So, but they do have a credit card, and a lot of times in roofing and all of these kind of things where you have these bigger ticketed items, the customer will say probably about 10 to 20% of the time, hey, do you do credit line? Will you put this on the arm, make monthly payments or stuff like that? And I don't know, we kind of talked about that last week. Cash is king, and so try to get your cash in as quick as possible.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But don't lose the sale by making sure you have a product like the Square, because most people have credit on the arm. Most people have credit cards, they have, refis, they have lots of money there. They just don't have cash in the bank.
Let's talk about a credit card a minute.
Let's talk
There
about
are people that take the position that all credit cards are bad. I'm not one of those. I will tell you this, credit cards are bad if you don't pay it off in 30 days. But the reality is if you use a credit card and you have a problem, you have some recourse. If they've got the cash, you don't have any recourse. So what I try to do, if somebody will give me a discount for cash money, then guess what? I'll give them cash money. But if they're not, then I'm going to give them a credit card. I've got an extra 30 days with mine, and I don't make much on it if it's sitting in the bank. But still, 1% is better than nothing. And a credit card, they'll charge the person you're buying from 2 to 3%, 4%, depending on what it is. But that person's willing to take that as a deduction on their gross margin so they get their cash immediately. If they aren't willing to pass it on to me, then I'm going to let them eat it. It's just more convenient. I keep up with it. I can manage it better.
So from a business owner standpoint, you said the other day, it was a little bit shocking, and you were talking about the difference between you and your wife, and you said your wife wants to pay the bills early, the
Sure.
credit card bills, any bills she want, try to pay it early. And you're like, I'm that day guy.
That's right.
Kind of talk about the mindset behind, stretching that out. Kind of what, you feel as is the advantage of it.
Well, the advantage is to have cash in your hand. I mean, I keep money in a money market, and right now it's at 1.25%. I've got a checking account that doesn't pay me any interest, and so why should I not get 1.25%? I mean, it's found money, and if you don't pay attention to those little details, then shame on you. It's gonna cost you more down the road if you don't pay attention. You got to pay attention to those tax issues. I don't know how many of y'all have looked at what the government is doing right now, but they've given married couples over $24,000 worth of standard deduction. And what I'm doing is I am taking a standard deduction every other year because my charitable giving and my other expenses will exceed $24,000. But if I put it into 1 year, I double pay my years ahead, then I get to take 2 bites out of that apple, and the next year the government's going to give me the 24 whether I spend it or not. It's crazy to leave that, and that tax benefit is real.
Well, and to know those things, I mean, yeah. That was a real surprise when you brought that up to me. I was like, what? Something I didn't know, real revelation of, money saved, because we do a lot. So kind of talk about, go into a little deeper of that process of the tax.
Well, it's pretty simple. As a married couple, you got $24,000 of tax deduction that's automatic right now. But if you choose to take the expenses that year and you spend every year, spend $25,000, you really get only an extra $1,000 deduction. But if you take that can be put off 1 year to the other, and if you got to cash, what Ann and I did is in December, we prepaid our tithe, our expenses, those kind of things into a trust that gave us a tax deduction last year. And this year, we're not going to make the monthly payments. They are. It's a system that you still make your payments to your charitable organizations, but next year, I'll take the extra money this in 19, and next year I won't spend that much, but I still get 24. So any difference between 24 and what I actually spend on insurance and on state taxes and on taxes for my ad valorem taxes is found money. It makes about $2,500 of real cash per year, and it's just something you do. Matter of fact, my wife last night asked me to explain that to her again, and she asked me how fast do you pay off these bills? And I actually showed her on Quicken that if you pay Georgia Power and it's due on the 25th, electronically you can send it on the 24th and it'll be there because it shows up in that bank account. If you're going to pay the gas people, they don't have an electronic account. I'm talking about the natural gas. They write a check. You got to send it a week ahead. She thought that was too complicated. She said, I'd rather just write all the checks. I said, baby, that's okay. If you want to write the checks after I'm gone, you can. And she looked at me and said, why don't you keep doing what you do?
Keep the way you're going.
Keep the way we're going.
Well, for like businesses, I think sometimes we pay stuff off early because we're in fear of, well, what's going to happen next week? I got the money now. Let's go ahead and pay for it. And we feel like that's security rather than keeping the security of having that money in the bank.
I like to get return on my assets. Matter of fact, one of the best criteria I can give a person is what is your return on average net assets? And net assets means you got payables and you got receivables that got to come out of it. You got to balance those. So I try to keep my cash as long as I can, get a return on that cash, and then if I can get an incentive to pay it early, I will. If you've got somebody that's you ordered $100,000 worth of stuff from, and they say net 30, you could ask them this stupid question: is there an incentive to pay it early? And they'll say yes, or they'll say no. And then you got to find it out: is there a penalty if I pay it in 45? I mean, you got to understand that dragging payables is one way to increase cash in your account, and speeding up receivables is the other way. The main way to keep cash in your account, though, is to run a good business. Have good sales, good margins, keep your expenses low. But you got to look after those details as well of receivables and inventory, and look at your assets, because that's expense that is real.
Lots of people run into financial problems and not balancing right. What are some of kind of the ways to help them through that, either with a small business loan or
no, sir.
Factoring. Is that a? Well, I mean, that's not talked about much. I mean,
let me talk to you about factoring, because I've never used it, but I've had it explained to me a blue million times, and I got a cousin that's in that business, and it's legitimate. What you'll do is you'll have $100,000 worth of receivables, and let's say that the person that owes you that money is net 30, and that person is a good credit risk. You go to my cousin, and he says, I'll give you $98,000 for that receivable. Boom. You get a check the next day, you got $98,000, you go on. He collects at the end of 30 days his $100,000. You say, why would he do that? I said, pretty simple. He's got plenty of money, and that $2,000 he's made on 30 days of tying up $98,000. So that's actually 24% return on his money. That's interest he's earned at 24%. Now, he's got to collect the money. He's got a little risk at it. But what it says to you is you're willing to pay 24% for that money. And if I'm your customer and you want to factor my account, then that guy's going to come talk to me. He's going to say, show me your financials, all this kind of stuff. And it's going to say, wait a minute now, Ben, you're selling me something and I'm willing to pay you in 30 days, but you're willing to pay 24% to this guy, what's wrong with your financials? And the right answer for that is, well, we're growing so fast, we need the cash. That's really the only, and the other thing is, and our bank has got us where we are, and we're growing, and we're using all our line of credit. So this is the way we can continue to grow. We got to slow down if we don't get to cash that way and get your customer to understand it. But it does say in his mind, if he's thinking about it, your customer, my supplier is paying 24% interest for the money. And that says that says a lot.
Well, because it's a one-time payment. It's not overtime payment, basically, because you're not even making the payment. Basically, the person, right? And now, if they don't pay, though, I'm off the hook. You're off the hook. So
off the hook. The factoring company, they lose the money if they don't pay.
Right. So that's why the factoring company will do the due diligence of the company that you're working for.
But you've lost a customer. If he doesn't pay, you've lost a customer. So you've got to. All those things kind of work together. They really do.
TCI Business Capital is a factoring company that provides that service. And so, if that's something that you feel like you're willing to put on the table, I'd tell you to call TCI Business Capital today. So if you don't like that process, that's one way of keeping that cash flow going. Next way is small business loan.
My experience with small business loans is it takes 40 forevers to get one, and 40 forevers is a long time. And it is really burdensome to go through that process. But they do have longer terms, and they do have a lower interest rate. I prefer you go to your friendly banker, sit down, build a relationship with him, help him get and be a part of your business. And he'll, by nature, it's kind of like dragging a anchor across the lake. He's going to help slow you down. If you want to grow at 1,000% a month, your local banker is not going to be happy with that. You're going to have to go to some venture capital type of person to do that. But local bankers, normal people, that's where you get your growth money from.
Well, you're exactly right, because basically if you go to the local bank, they're only going to meet once a month. And so then they'll meet that once a month, and then they'll come back and they'll say, well, what about this issue? What about, and yeah, to get a local bank business loan is like 3 months, 4 months. I mean, it is a slow, tedious product. And I've given them tons of information. I mean, contracts and, all what I have paid off on my house, what I have paid off on my building, my cars, basically all of my assets, and put everything out there. And then they're still like, well, what about this? There are some online services that are a lot quicker and faster right now, like Lightstream. Lightstream is only for people who have really high credit score, to go on and make those loans. SoFi is actually, you can have a lesser credit score and get on with, they give like up to $100,000, even a little bit more very quickly, SoFi. But people are worried about putting their information online to get loans. And I'm thinking, I'd rather put it out online to get a loan quicker than I would, have to go through the drama of the bank.
I've never used the online folks,
right?
But so times are changing. I mean, they really are, and I wouldn't be opposed to trying one of them. I'm just kind of, if the bank's nervous, then it makes me nervous, So I'd say give it a chance, try it if you want to, but look at what are they asking you to pledge in spite of it, and to cover it.
Well, that's kind of the interesting thing when we're talking about cash flow. Basically, you can get cash flow from selling the product, from your profit.
Number one place,
get cash for your product. Number two place, get your product on the arm. That's cash. I mean, if you have product, that's an asset. There's money there. There's real money in getting it a product on the arm. I mean, if you can get it for 30 days, 45 days, 60 days, 90 days, you got product for 270 days.
Sure.
But that's real cash.
Well, they had it sitting on the inventory, and we were going to use it, so why not have it committed? They knew it was sold and to get their money.
And then you have basically Also, the next way of getting cash is instead of making a loan to people, you can get credit card money in. So that you let them, you have the credit cards money that can influx into your business. You can do a loan to people for, the products that you're selling or services you're selling. You can go to the bank and get money in. Like, to me, there's 10 different ways to get cash flow into your business.
And you can pull it off your hip. That's something that normally when you get to where you need it, you've already done that. But think about that.
Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to say is I think when we look at cash flow, it's not just one way. There's multiple different ways. And if I were to think like just the process of what is the easiest way? Well, I already know my product. I already know my service. So that's going to be the easiest way is start first getting the profit in, getting that cash flow from the customer. The hardest way is probably going to the banker, because that's the longest. And then it's also not my business. So I feel uncomfortable going to the banker. I feel, because it's a new experience. It's not my day-to-day talking to a banker. It takes the longest time and everything like that. So, that's the other process of what do you know how to get money? The factoring thing. How many people today are listening have ever heard of factoring?
I don't know.
It's a legitimate way to get money for cash flow into your business.
One piece of advice I'd give you on banking is that call your banker before you need the money. Say, I'd like to come in and talk to you about my business. I'd like to share with you what I'm doing. And get him pre-positioned to help you if you get in trouble. There's nothing wrong with going in and having him look at it. You talk to him, get to know him. He'll ask you some questions about what's there. And if he's a good banker, he'll explain to you the kind of criteria he's under. What are the things that I can do? Back in 2008 when the time was at, if you had valuable land, he couldn't loan you a dime on it because the federal government wasn't letting him take any real estate. It's amazing how that was precipitated not only by poor decisions, but also by what our Fed did for us. So you go sit down with your banker, sit down with the folks that you're going to factor with, get with those folks beforehand, because the best time to get money is when you don't need it. Trust me. If you need money and got to have it, it is expensive to go get, for sure.
Let's talk about the analyzing of if you need the money, because like I said, if you're going to borrow a credit card, the best way is to pay it every 30 days because there's going to be an interest rate tied to that. That's pretty phenomenal. So we run about a $50,000 credit limit on our credit card, and it's interesting to say, but we pay off that money every month.
Sure.
But 18% on $50,000 is a chunk of money. We know that check's coming in. But see, like we only get paid once a month. So for that cash flow standpoint of, all right, what material, what will our lenders let us have, which is credit card? What will our suppliers let us have? But then you come down to the realness of the employees, the subcontractors, the people doing the work who need and have to have that money every week.
One thing you don't want to do is drag paying your employees. You can't do that. You've got to pay them regular. They got to know without a shadow of a doubt this check is going to be good when it gets to the bank. So look after your employees. Don't think about trying to drag them in any way at all. Drag payables and collect early as much as you can on your receivables. Those are two things you can do.
I noticed a trick on collecting early on receivables that I see that my suppliers are doing is they'll say we'll take off 2 to 3%.
That's right.
And even up to 5%. And I would just encourage people that that's negotiable. Like I think we missed the point that everything is negotiable.
That's right.
And I think just by making a phone call to say, hey, would you take 5% off of this product if I pay you early? That's profit made. That's cash flow made.
If you need the inventory, because if you call me, I'm saying, well, I would if you take another truckload. If you need the product and if you got it sold and you're going to collect all that. That's dependent on having a real good plan. Every time I sit down with somebody and try to talk to them about their business, they're in trouble, the first question I'll ask them, and it's a stupid question, but they don't have the answer. I say, where do you make your money? And they look at me and they say, well, I make it on selling stuff. I said, which stuff? Which product do you make your money on? Then they'll talk about one, and I'll say, well, how fast do you collect your cash on it? How fast do you have to pay for it? What's your inventory you got tied up in it? And I start peeling the onion a little bit, and they see they really don't know where their cash flow comes from. Most people that sell multiple products have got different issues on each one of them. So you need to analyze the business you're doing. Sometimes you need to get out of certain segments of your business. Do you resemble that? Do you understand what I'm talking about?
I do 100% because I remember you asking me that stupid question. And here's where I went into. I basically took that and I said, well, if I do this work for this person, they pay me every Friday. Yeah. But I only make 25%. And then I looked at other contractors that I'd worked for, and they would pay me once a month, but I would make 50 or 100%. And to me, I had to say, if my time is important to me, why would I take 25% profit? Can I manage and change my money and the way that I process my money and work for somebody that I'm making 100% profit just by changing my system of how I collect money or what am I paying out? And for me, it was kind of reducing down the brand new truck and, some of these things. That's how I did it. Basically, I was able to shift my company from making 25% profit on every job to making 100% profit on the job. Just by maneuvering my money and finances, thinking a little differently.
You have a plan, and if you think through what's happening with each product, like we talked about, you can put that in place and make it work. If you don't plan for it, you're dead in the water. And a plan is something that you've got to put in detail, and everybody's got to understand it, and you got to have action programs flowing out of that plan of who's going to do what, how's this money going to be collected, who's going to call the supplier, who's going to do this, who's going to do that. All those things need to be clearly communicated. If you're a one-man show, then you got to keep it in your head clear, and most of the time you need to write it down email.
I had John in the other week, and we were talking about Six Sigma.
Six Sigma.
And, but is there a process for financing the same way there is Six Sigma of making sure your operations and flow of things are going? I mean, is there a process?
When you do a good plan, a strategic and annual plan, you do it on a monthly basis, you do it by product, you do it by customer, you do it by line item expense. It is complicated. But every month, and there's plenty of software that'll help you do that, you can see on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis, depends on how you plan, what business you're in, what is my cash flow? And you can predict at this month, this is when my need is going to be the greatest. This is when I'm going to run out of money. And so if you're going to do that, then what you may want to do is not order as big a pile of stuff that comes due that month. You may want to move some things, but you have to do it on a planned basis and look at what are my cash flows on a business going forward basis.
I love it.
Planning is critical. Once you have a plan in place, then you got to organize around it. Plan, organize, control. Organize means I organize my finances to go with what my cash flow needs are and my capital needs and my expense needs. Also means you organize your people. What skills, abilities do you need to make this plan work? Right now, I need to sell something in California, but don't even have a salesman out there. Maybe I ought to get a salesman to go to California. Just brilliant things like that. But it's that simple thing that you can plan ahead to hire that person. And in control, you sit around the table whenever you get it worked out, maybe once a week, maybe once a month. Your accountant and your business analyst comes back to you and says, this is what we did last month. And by the way, we made a little less than we thought we were. Then you ask the people, said, okay, what did we do last month so we missed our plan? And the more detail you can give an answer to that, it's what I call event-oriented reconciliation. You take each event. We said this customer's going to buy this much product, and he didn't. And so you go back and look at another one. Why didn't he? Have you reforecast that to come in the next month? Do we need to reforecast what's going on? You can make adjustments if you know what's happened and why. Then you can plan to make something happen in the future. So I think controlling what's going forward, if you get a plan that you find out, boy, they're not going to buy this widget. People don't like it. And yet I've got a plan to make some next month. You can stop it. You got to plan, organize resources around it, and control back to the plan. That's the real secret. And it's a lot more complicated than the words I've just used. That's the real secret running a business.
Well, it is, but it is, again, with the help of you, I realized by that what you just said. What happened last month? What happened the year before? What happened the years, before that for the last 10 years? And I found out from our conversation that I was very seasonal. And basically during November, December, January, February, I was like dead in the water. And so I put all my eggs in the basket, and then I would come up and my basket would be empty for 4 months. Yeah. And so I would use out all of my profit. And once I realized that I'm the one who put myself in that position by accepting just doing this type of work, just doing this type of service. And once I realized that I don't have to be a slave to this system. I can change the system. I can take my skills, I can take my abilities, and I can go somewhere else. And so then it's like, well, what other place can I make the same amount of money on a consistent basis? So many times a company will come into the end of the year and we think that they want to spend a bunch of money, but a lot of them pause. And they're like, well, we've already spent so much money. Let's put this off until the next year. And like now I'm seeing at the first of the year, my phone has been ringing off the hook because everybody's like, new year, let's start spending, the money again. And so, yeah, just to be basically dependent on the system that we're in. Are people going to spend the money all the way through the holidays? Are they going to stop during the summertime? So many different things to think and analyze monthly.
No doubt about it. Each market has got seasonality to it. It's got impacts of what the Fed's going to do. It's got impacts of what the farmer's going to do. It's got depends on the business you're in. You got to really understand that. You got to be able to forecast what's going to happen. If you had sat down the summer before and forecasted January, February, March is going to be empty, you'd have made a different saying, wouldn't you?
I would have. But because I didn't analyze it, I stayed in that junk for a couple years.
Yeah.
I just thought it is what it is.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I know you were in the farming industry. And I heard one time a guy talk about, he went from Michigan down to Brazil. And he was running like 4 crops a year, when in Michigan he was only doing 1 crop a year.
If he's lucky.
And so did you see that selling in Brazil, that your volume went up quicker or stuff like that because that climate was able to do more crops a year? I mean, did you also kind of see that process?
Well, Brazil they're off cycle from us too, so that gives us an advantage. And most of Brazil doesn't have a winter, a frost. Most of down southern Brazil it does, but up around the equator it's just go to it all the time. And land is just like people; it needs a rest. So soil is something that they may make 2 crops, they may make 3 crops, but they try to look after the soil as well as they can. It gives you a chance to bite the apple 2 or 3 times a year. Where up here, especially in northern parts, you don't get but about one piece of bite. In Florida, on vegetables, you get a couple of bites most of the time. So it helps to understand the cyclic approach to that market, no matter whether you're in agriculture or whatever you're in.
There is a cycle to your business.
There is.
And there's no cycle that's a perfect cycle either.
No.
I remember when the recession went down, everybody's like, go into healthcare. People are always sick, but there's always cycles to everything.
And people have got to figure out where they can be successful. And you can if you know your customer and know what you're doing.
Know the cycle of your money, because that's the true form of your cash flow.
And the other thing I would say to you, no matter how smart you are, find a way to be sure that you've got access to cash when you got to have it. Because if you run out of cash, you run in the ditch.
Let me ask you that. I mean, if I'm flipping, $200,000 a month, how much would you say that I should keep in the bank? I mean, sometimes basically we're all in and we're all out, I mean, on the 25th, it's a huge check. And by the 24th of next month, it's nobody. I mean, what do you think would be something good for a business to kind of put in as a standard?
I'd say you got to look at your plan. And what I would want to do is look at what is my lowest, when my cash going to be the lowest, when do I have the maximum need for cash? And I'd want to have in a certain place at least 50% of that need. That's how I'd look at it.
50%?
Yeah, 50% of that need. Because let me tell you, no matter how well you are, you can miss cash flow by 50%. And so you need that way you can go back and get it. Now, you may not understand what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about you forecast what your worst month cash flow is going to be. Well, you got to come up with it and cover 50% of that. You should be okay.
Well, I know exactly, because basically I'm in this month and I've calculated from my 25th to my 25th, and I'm like, all right, based on these jobs, this is where my cash flow needs to go. Well, my phone's rung off the hook and I've got about 10 more jobs that just came in, and so I'm sitting there saying, all right, where are the finances and how quick are we going to get these finances back? So I definitely know you cannot cut such a thin line on 25th to the 25th, or check to check, or week to week, or month to month. You definitely have to have some reserves in the bank, which thank goodness we do. But just what is that number to have?
A good way to have that reserve is called a line of credit. And the time to get the line of credit is when you don't need it. It'll cost you maybe a point to get it, but it's there when you need it. You hadn't got to go through the 3 months of arguing with the bank. You've already got it set up.
Right.
And so you transfer it in, transfer it out. You pay interest, but you pay to have the line, and then you pay interest on the money you draw against that line. Don't get into it and say, well, that line's there, I'm going to go get it and just use it. You still got to have the discipline to run a very tight cash flow ship.
So almost get the money and forget it's there.
You don't get it, you have the right to get it.
Right.
Well, the line of credit says, the bank says, if you come in and want $100,000, we'll give it to you. And we're going to charge you $1,000 up front for that right. And then you come in 3 months later and say, I need 25 of it. They'll give you 25. You keep it 30 days, they'll charge you interest on that money. Then you give them that money back and they say, okay. And you keep going through the year, and you might need it all in the 9th month of the year. You go get it, you keep it for 30 days, you pay it back. If you pay down a line of credit, banks are a lot more easy to get along, especially if you're in a seasonal kind of business, because they understand seasonal needs.
I like it. SoFi is a great company to borrow money from online. Jimmy, I'm going to give you the last word.
The last word is the one the first we started with. Cash is king. If you don't pay attention to your cash, you're going broke, folks. And don't go broke. God bless you.
Until next time.